What was your family's cruelest rule? Every night, my dad made us vote on which family member deserved to sleep in a real bed and who had to sleep in the metal shed outside. And if you refused to rank your own mother and siblings from best to worst, you automatically got the shed. Dad sat at the head of the table with his stupid clipboard, reading out our names like some sick game show host. "Time for rankings," he'd say, smiling while the rest of us stared at our plates. He was always exempt because he managed the system, which meant he slept in the master bedroom every night while we tore each other apart for the remaining spots. The best bed went to whoever got ranked highest, which meant an actual mattress, soft pillows, warm blankets, and your own room with a door that locked. Second place got the couch in the living room, while third got a sleeping bag on the basement floor. Fourth place got the garage with just a yoga mat, and dead last slept in the shed. By the time I was 12, I'd spent dozens of nights in that shed. We all had, except for Dad. One night when I was 13, all my siblings ranked me last because they were pissed I'd lost my shoe and made them late for school that morning. The metal floor burned cold through the gasoline-soaked blanket while rain hammered the roof like gunshots. Spiders dropped from the ceiling onto my face and mice ran over my legs while I shivered until my bones hurt. The rankings destroyed us in exactly the ways Dad wanted. My brother Yutef sabotaged everyone else constantly to look better by comparison. He'd hide homework, break things and blame others, start fights right before dinner to make someone look bad. Once he put sugar in Mom's gas tank so she'd miss work and look irresponsible to Dad. She spent 3 nights in the shed while her car got fixed, and Yutef slept soundly on the couch. Playing nice never worked because someone always needed a scapegoat to avoid last place. Good grades and finished chores meant nothing when the alternative was freezing on metal flooring. Every dinner became a silent calculation of who you could sacrifice tonight, which family member you loved least in that moment, whose suffering would hurt you least to cause. My sister Yasmin had perfected crying on command and would sob during dinner about her previous nights in the shed, instantly earning sympathy votes. Yusef made deals and promises, trading future high rankings for votes now. Mom tried staying neutral, but that just meant everyone ranked her low for not having allies, so she spent more nights in the shed than anyone. After years of this, we barely spoke except to negotiate votes. Family dinner was just Dad reading rankings while we glared at each other across the table, calculating betrayals and planning revenge. I kept a notebook tracking voting patterns, looking for alliances to exploit or weaknesses to target. Trust between us had died long ago, and love followed shortly after. Then Yasmin got sick during a week of storms, running a fever so high she couldn't sit up at dinner. Dad's rule was absolute because no vote meant automatic shed placement. She lay there shaking and delirious, too weak to even point at names on his list. "Rules are rules," Dad said, marking her down for the shed before carrying her out there himself, while rain poured through the rust holes. By morning, she had pneumonia and was coughing up blood on the metal floor. Still too sick to vote the next night meant another automatic shed placement. I tried sneaking her extra blankets, but Dad caught me and called it tampering with rankings, which earned me 5 nights in the shed as punishment. I spent those nights listening to my baby sister dying 10 feet away, while Dad made notes about maintaining system integrity. Mom finally defied Dad and took Yasmin to the hospital, but by then something in Yutef had permanently broken. He'd do anything to avoid the shed, including recording conversations for blackmail material and putting laxatives in food before ranking day. He spread lies about Mom that made Dad scream at her for hours, guaranteeing she'd get sympathy votes from us. The doctors asked about Yasmin's frostbitten toes and the rust marks on her skin, but Mom lied and said she'd been camping. They didn't believe her, but couldn't prove anything without Yasmin talking, and she hadn't said a word since getting sick. Dad punished Mom with 2 weeks straight in the shed, and she came back thinner and quieter. One night, Dad announced a new development in his system. The shed wasn't the bottom anymore because he'd dug a pit behind it with just dirt walls and a tarp on top. "For whoever ranks last starting now," he explained, visibly excited about his innovation, "the shed will be for second to last. Progress." Yusef immediately volunteered to dig it deeper in exchange for immunity from last place for a week, and I knew we were completely lost. My brother was literally digging a grave for his family members to sleep in just to avoid it himself. Mom had given up entirely, automatically ranking herself last every night with a defeated smile. Yasmin remained too weak to vote properly, which guaranteed more shed nights. The pit was almost finished, and tonight someone would sleep in dirt. I stare at the hole behind the shed, dirt walls packed tight and the blue tarp stretched across the top like some kind of twisted camping setup. My stomach twists into knots as Dad walks out the back door with his clipboard, that sick smile spreading across his face when he sees us all looking. He taps the clipboard against his palm and announces that tonight marks a special occasion because someone gets to be first in the pit. Yasmin sits slumped at the kitchen table inside, barely able to hold her head up, and I know if she can't vote again, she'll end up down there in the cold dirt. I make myself a promise right then that I'll take her place no matter what it costs me, even if Dad adds extra punishment nights or makes up new rules to hurt me worse. The sun is setting and the temperature is already dropping, frost starting to form on the grass around the pit's edges. Dad calls us inside for dinner and we file in silently, taking our usual spots around the table while he sits at the head with his clipboard ready. He's smiling that awful smile again, the one that says he's enjoying every second of this, and we all stare down at our plates to avoid making eye contact with him or each other. Mom speaks first in this flat, empty voice that sounds like all the life got sucked out of her, ranking herself last the way she always does now with that defeated little smile. Yusef leans over and whispers that he'll rank me second to last if I support him for the couch, his eyes cold and calculating like he's working out some business deal instead of deciding where his family members sleep tonight. I want to punch him in the face, but I need allies if I'm going to keep Yasmin safe, so I nod slightly and watch Dad making notes on his clipboard. Yusef starts his usual performance, reminding everyone in this cheerful voice how he helped with dishes and took out the trash today, conveniently leaving out the part where he broke the bathroom faucet this morning and told Dad I did it. Yasmin tries her crying routine, but she's too weak to make it work, tears just sliding down her pale cheeks without the dramatic sobs that usually get her sympathy votes. She's shaking from fever or cold or both, and I can see her trying so hard to participate but failing. The whole ritual makes me physically sick, but I force myself to go through the motions anyway, ranking people in my head, and calculating who I can sacrifice tonight, because refusing to vote means automatic pit placement, and I can't help Yasmin if I'm the one down there. Dad reads through each name slowly, savoring the moment, while we call out our rankings one by one. When Dad finishes counting the votes, he looks almost disappointed for a second, then announces that Mom gets the pit and Yasmin gets the shed. Something about his tone makes it clear he was hoping Yasmin would end up in the pit for the big debut, but the numbers worked out different. I feel this tiny moment of relief until I look at Mom's face and watch it go completely blank, all expression draining away like someone pulled a plug. She doesn't protest or argue or even look upset, just stands up slowly and walks toward the back door like a ghost floating across the room. I want to scream that this isn't normal, that families don't do this to each other, that we should all refuse together and let Dad sleep in his own stupid pit. But the words get stuck in my throat and won't come out. Yusef is already heading for the living room to claim the couch, and Yasmin shuffles toward the back door, coughing wetly into her hand. That night, I lie on my sleeping bag in the basement and can't stop thinking about the storm week when Yasmin got pneumonia. I can still hear her coughing up blood on the metal shed floor, this awful wet sound that went on for hours while I shivered through my own punishment nights for trying to sneak her blankets. Dad had called it tampering with rankings and added 5 extra nights to my sentence, standing there with his clipboard taking notes about maintaining system integrity, while his daughter was literally dying 10 feet away from him. The memory makes my hands shake with rage, and I have to press them flat against the concrete floor to make them stop. Mom is in the pit right now, lying in cold dirt with just a tarp between her and the night sky, and I'm down here safe and warm by comparison. The guilt sits heavy in my chest, but I remind myself that being in the basement means I can still help, still plan, still figure out how to stop this. I can't sleep knowing Mom is out there, so I sneak over to the tiny basement window and look out at the backyard. It's almost midnight and getting colder, frost forming thick on the grass around the edges of the pit. The tarp sags slightly in the middle where Mom must be lying underneath, and I can see her shape moving occasionally, trying to find a position that doesn't hurt as much. Dad's bedroom light is still on upstairs, and I can see his shadow moving around behind the curtains, probably reviewing his precious clipboard and making notes about tonight's rankings, planning new ways to torture us tomorrow. He's probably excited about how well the pit is working, already thinking about improvements he could make or new rules he could add to the system. I pull out my phone that I've been hiding in my sleeping bag, wrapped in an old sock so Dad won't find it if he searches down here. I look at the photos I took weeks ago of Yasmin's frostbitten toes, the skin black and dead looking at the tips and the rust marks on her back from the shed floor that look like someone beat her. My hands shake as I scroll through the images and realize I have to do something bigger than just taking pictures, something that might actually stop this before someone dies in that pit. Even if it means Dad punishes me worse than ever, even if he adds weeks to my shed time or invents some new horrible consequence, I can't let Yasmin end up down there in the dirt. The photos are evidence, but they're not enough. Not when Dad can smile and charm his way through any conversation, making everyone believe we're just dramatic kids exaggerating normal discipline. The next morning, I wait until I hear the shower running upstairs, then creep into the kitchen where Mom is standing at the sink. I whisper about maybe calling someone for help, a teacher or a neighbor or even the police, keeping my voice low so Dad won't hear through the bathroom door. Mom grabs my arm hard enough to leave marks, her fingers digging into my skin, and warns me in this urgent whisper that Dad always finds out about everything we do. She says he has ways of knowing, that he checks our phones and reads our notebooks, and listens to our conversations, and anyone who tries to get outside help just ends up punished worse. Her eyes look hollow and scared, like all the fight got beaten out of her years ago, and I realize she's been broken so completely that she can't even imagine escape anymore. She actually believes we're stuck in this system forever, that there's no way out except to survive it one night at a time. At breakfast, Yusef is practically bouncing in his chair, bragging to Dad about how he made the pit 6 inches deeper yesterday afternoon. He holds up his hands to show off the blisters on his palms like they're trophies he won, going on about how the extra depth will provide better insulation or some garbage like that. Dad actually smiles at him, this genuine proud father smile I haven't seen in years, and promises Yusef immunity from last place for the next week as a reward for his hard work. I feel physically sick watching my brother volunteer to dig what's basically a grave for his own family members, doing it eagerly just to save himself from ending up down there. Yusef meets my eyes across the table, and there's no guilt or shame in his expression, just this cold satisfaction that he's secured his safety for another week. He's turned into exactly what Dad wanted him to be. I spend the rest of the morning trying to understand why Dad does this, what he actually gets from watching us destroy each other every single night. It's not just about control, though that's part of it. He genuinely enjoys the rankings. I can see it in his face when he reads the results, the way his eyes light up when we have to calculate who we love least in that moment. He likes the fear in our eyes when we realize we might be going to the pit, the desperate negotiations we make with each other, the way trust between us died years ago and got replaced with survival calculations. He calls it system integrity and talks about fairness and rules, but really it's just cruelty disguised as some kind of reasonable family structure. And he's the only one who never suffers, never spends a single night cold or scared or hurt, just sleeps in his comfortable bed every night while we tear each other apart for the remaining spots. At the school the next day, I can barely keep my eyes open during first period, my head nodding forward every few minutes until I jerk awake again. The teacher's voice sounds like it's coming from underwater, and the words on the board blur together into meaningless shapes. I dig my fingernails into my palm hard enough to leave marks, because falling asleep means I won't be able to think clearly tonight, and if I can't participate in rankings, I get the pit automatically. During math class, I start doing calculations that have nothing to do with the lesson, figuring out how to protect Yasmin tonight. If I can convince Yusef to rank Mom second to last and I volunteer for last place myself, at least Yasmin gets the couch. It's not much protection, but it's something, and keeping her safe is the only thing that still matters in this destroyed family. The bell rings for lunch, and instead of going to the cafeteria, I head straight for the bathroom on the second floor that nobody uses. I lock myself in the far stall and pull out my phone with shaking hands, rolling up my sleeves to photograph the bruises on my arms from 3 nights ago when Dad grabbed me during a ranking argument. The marks have faded to yellow and green, but they're still visible, proof that this isn't normal discipline. I take 5 photos from different angles, making sure the bruises show up clearly in the bathroom's harsh lighting. Then I open my voice recorder app and start explaining the system in a low whisper, keeping my voice factual and calm even though my hands won't stop trembling. I describe the shed, the pit, the nightly votes, how Dad exempts himself while forcing us to rank each other. My mouth goes dry halfway through and I have to stop and swallow before continuing, terrified that someone will walk in and hear me, that Dad will somehow find out what I'm doing. The whole recording is maybe 90 seconds long, but it feels like hours, and when I'm done, my heart is pounding so hard I feel sick. I delete the recording from the recent files list and stuff my phone back in my pocket, then sit on the toilet lid trying to calm down enough to go to class. The rest of the school day passes in a blur of exhaustion and planning. I keep thinking about Miss McCann, how she's always been kind when I've fallen asleep in her class, the way she looks at me sometimes like she knows something is wrong. If I can just get her to really listen, maybe she'll help us. I practice the words in my head during every class, trying to figure out how to explain the shed and pit without sounding crazy or dramatic. It has to sound believable, factual, like I'm reporting something that happened rather than making up stories for attention. By the time the final bell rings, I've rehearsed it 20 times, and the words almost sound normal instead of completely insane. After school, I go to the library instead of heading straight home, finding a computer in the back corner where nobody can see my screen. I create a new email account with a random username that has nothing to do with my real name, then upload all the photos and audio files to a hidden folder in the cloud. It takes forever because the library Wi-Fi is slow, and I keep checking over my shoulder to make sure nobody is watching. Once everything is uploaded, I delete the files from my phone's camera roll and recent items, going through every folder twice to make sure Dad won't find anything if he checks. The hidden cloud folder is password protected, and the password is something Dad would never guess. A line from a book Yasmin used to read before she got too sick to care about stories. I get home right before dinner and Dad is already at the table with his clipboard, that sick smile on his face like he's about to host a game show. Mom is setting out plates with mechanical movements, her face blank and empty. Yasmin sits hunched in her chair, coughing into her elbow, and Yusef is watching everyone with calculating eyes. I slide into my seat and immediately lean toward Yusef, keeping my voice barely above a whisper. I tell him I'll rank him high tonight if he helps keep Yasmin off the bottom, promising him the couch if he ranks Mom second to last. His eyes narrow as he considers the deal, weighing the benefits against the risks. Dad's gaze shifts toward us, and I can see him noticing the whispered conversation, but Yusef gives me a tiny nod of agreement. When the voting starts, I rank Yusef second and myself last, and Yusef follows through on our deal. The final results give Yasmin the couch, Yusef the sleeping bag in the basement, Mom the shed, and me the garage. It feels like a victory for about 30 seconds, until I notice Dad making notes on his clipboard with that cold, calculating expression he gets when he's planning something new. After dinner, Dad stands up and announces a new rule in his calm, reasonable voice. He explains that any collusion or vote trading will result in automatic pit placement for both parties involved, effective immediately. His eyes are locked on me and Yuchef as he speaks, and my stomach drops as I realize he saw everything. Our whispered deal, the coordinated votes, all of it. He's always one step ahead, always finding new ways to isolate us from each other and prevent any kind of alliance. My small victory turns to ashes in my mouth as I understand that protecting Yasmin just got infinitely harder. Yusef won't risk helping me again now that Dad has made it a punishable offense, and I'll be on my own trying to keep her safe. That night, I lie on the yoga mat in the garage, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of the house settling. The concrete floor is cold through the thin mat, and my back already hurts from the hard surface. I think about Yasmin getting weaker every day, Mom giving up completely, Yuchef turning into a monster just to survive. If I don't speak up now, someone is going to die in that pit. Maybe Yasmin from another bout of pneumonia, maybe Mom from the cold and starvation, maybe even me if Dad decides to make an example. I have to risk outside help no matter what Dad does to punish me, because living with the guilt of staying silent would be worse than any night in the pit. The next morning at the school, Mrs. McCann pulls me aside after I turn in an essay that I can barely remember writing. The words on the page are a mess, sentences trailing off mid-thought and paragraphs that don't connect to each other. She holds the paper carefully and asks if everything is okay at home, her voice gentle and concerned. I want to tell her everything right there in the hallway, want to describe the pit and the shed and the nightly rankings, but the words stick in my throat like they're glued there. Instead, I just say things are complicated and stressful, giving her enough to worry about without fully explaining. She studies my face for a long moment, and I can see real concern in her eyes, not just teacher concern, but actual worry about my safety. She doesn't push for more details, but asks if I'd be willing to talk more after class tomorrow. I agree immediately because I need an ally, even though I'm terrified of what Dad will do if he finds out I've been talking to teachers. Mrs. McCann writes her email address on a piece of paper and tells me I can reach out anytime, even on weekends, and something about her quiet kindness makes my eyes burn with tears I refuse to let fall. That afternoon, I'm in the kitchen doing homework when the phone rings and Dad answers it in the living room. I can hear his voice shift into that pleasant, concerned father tone he uses with outsiders, thanking someone for caring and promising to make sure I get more rest. When he hangs up, he walks into the kitchen and just stares at me, his expression cold and full of barely contained rage. I don't have to ask who called because I already know it was Miss McCann, expressing concern about my academic performance and general well-being. Dad doesn't say anything, just looks at me with those calculating eyes while I pretend to focus on my homework. But I know what that look means. Tonight's ranking is going to be bad, and whatever protection I thought I'd built by documenting evidence just became worthless in the face of Dad's immediate retaliation. At dinner, Dad sits at the head of the table with his clipboard, but this time he doesn't even bother with the normal ranking ceremony. He just announces that I'm being moved to the garage as a pre-penalty for involving teachers in family business, which means I don't get to participate in rankings anymore. His voice is calm and reasonable, like he's explaining a simple consequence for bad behavior, instead of punishing me for trying to get help. He talks about how teachers need to stay out of family matters, and how my poor judgment has forced him to take protective measures. Yusef smirks from across the table, clearly happy that someone else is getting punished, and that he's safe for tonight. Mom won't meet my eyes, just stares at her plate while Dad explains the new arrangement. I realize this is exactly what happens when you try to reach out. You get punished while everyone else stays quiet to protect themselves from becoming the next target. The garage floor is cold concrete with just a thin yoga mat, and I know I'll be there for days or maybe weeks depending on how long Dad decides to drag this out. After dinner, I gather my sleeping bag and pillow, walking past my siblings without saying anything because there's nothing to say anymore. Yusef heads to the couch looking satisfied. Mom shuffles toward the shed with her usual defeated expression, and Yasmin coughs her way to the basement. Dad watches me walk to the garage with this small smile, like he's won something important by isolating me further from any chance of outside help. That night, I lie awake on the yoga mat, the cold seeping through the thin material and into my back. Around 2 a.m., I hear coughing coming from the backyard, wet and painful, probably Yasmin in the shed struggling to breathe. Then there's this metallic banging sound, like someone shifting around trying to find a position that doesn't hurt. I press my ear against the garage wall, but I can't tell if it's Mom in the pit or just the shed settling in the cold. Next door, our neighbor Fergus stands at his fence in his bathrobe, listening to the sounds of suffering coming from our property. He's an older man who lives alone and keeps odd hours, and I've seen him out in his yard late at night before. The coughing gets worse for a few minutes, then quieter, then starts again. The banging continues on and off, irregular and desperate. Fergus stands there for almost 10 minutes just listening, his face troubled in the darkness. I can see him through the small garage window, his silhouette against his porch light. He finally goes back inside, but he keeps looking back at our yard, like he knows something is wrong, but doesn't know what to do about it. Early the next morning before Dad wakes up, I sneak out of the garage while it's still dark outside. My hands shake as I tear a page from my school notebook and write 3 words, "Please help us." along with our address. The note is vague and desperate, but I'm running out of options, and Fergus is the only neighbor close enough to hear what happens at night. I fold the paper twice and creep across our yard to the fence line, then slip through the gap between the boards into Fergus's property. His mailbox is by his front door, and I shove the note inside, then run back before anyone sees me. I don't know if he'll do anything or just think I'm being dramatic. Some kid making up stories for attention. But I have to try something because Dad has cut off every other path to help. Back in the garage, I lie down and pretend to sleep, my heart pounding so hard I can feel it in my throat. If Dad finds out I contacted Fergus, I don't know what he'll do, but it will definitely be worse than the garage. That afternoon, there's a knock on our front door and Dad answers it with his usual charming smile. Fergus stands there holding a small package, making some excuse about how it was delivered to his house by mistake. I hover in the hallway behind Dad, trying to make eye contact with Fergus without being obvious. They chat pleasantly about the weather, about how cold it's been getting at night, about normal neighbor things. Dad deflects every subtle question about the family with practiced ease, talking about how busy we all are with school and work. Fergus asks if everyone's feeling okay since he heard some coughing last night, and Dad laughs it off, saying Yasmin has a little cold but nothing serious. I try to catch Fergus's eye, but Dad shifts his position to block me from view, still smiling and making small talk. Fergus looks frustrated and uncertain, like he wants to say more but doesn't know how without being rude or intrusive. After a few more minutes, he leaves with the package, glancing back at our house with this worried expression. Dad closes the door and turns to look at me, his eyes cold and calculating, and I know he suspects something even if he doesn't have proof yet. At the school, Mrs. McCann sits at her desk after class filing paperwork, her face serious and concerned. She's been thinking about me all day, about the exhaustion and the essay I wrote about feeling trapped, about my visible anxiety when she mentioned calling home. She opens the mandated reporter form on her computer and starts typing, listing specific observations that have worried her over the past few weeks. Falling asleep in class multiple times, flinching when touched, difficulty concentrating, references in my writing to sleeping in uncomfortable places. She describes how I seem scared of going home, how I avoid talking about my family, how I look thinner and more tired every day. It's not proof of anything concrete, nothing she can point to and say this is definitely abuse. But it's enough to trigger an investigation, enough to get someone official to look at our family situation. She submits the report and sends a copy to the school counselor, then sits back feeling both relieved and worried about what might happen next. 2 days later, a CPS social worker named Imani Mendez schedules an unannounced home visit for the following afternoon. She doesn't tell our family directly, just coordinates with Miss Ed McCann to confirm the address and best time to find everyone home. I don't know this is happening yet, sitting in class trying to stay awake and wondering if my note to Fergus did anything. Miss Ed McCann sends me an email during lunch saying she's thinking of me and hopes things get better soon, which feels like a tiny lifeline in the middle of drowning. I read it 3 times on the school library computer, looking for hidden meaning or promises she can't actually make. The words are simple and kind, and something about them makes my chest hurt because I'm not used to adults caring without wanting something in return. I delete the email immediately in case Dad checks the school system somehow, but I memorize the words first. The next morning, Dad seems different, tense and alert, like he senses something coming. Maybe he notices me acting different, or maybe he's just paranoid after Fergus's visit and Mr. McCann's phone call. He spends the morning preparing, moving through the house with cold efficiency. He puts boards over the pit to make it look like a garden project, throwing some seed packets on top for decoration. He goes to the shed and throws clean blankets over the dirty ones, arranging everything to look normal and temporary instead of like a regular sleeping space. Then he calls us all into the kitchen and coaches us on what to say if anyone asks questions. Tell them we're a normal family. Tell them the shed is for camping equipment. Tell them we sometimes sleep outside for fun during good weather. Uchef absorbs the instructions eagerly, nodding and asking clarifying questions like he's studying for a test. Mom nods mechanically, her face blank and obedient. I realize they're all going to lie perfectly because they're too scared to do anything else, too broken to imagine that telling the truth might actually help instead of making things worse. When Imani arrives that afternoon with her clipboard and kind smile, we perform exactly as Dad scripted. She's a black woman in her 30s with tired eyes and a gentle voice, and she sits in our living room asking questions while Dad hovers nearby. Uchef enthusiastically describes our loving family, even volunteering stories about camping trips that never happened. He talks about family game nights and weekend activities, painting this picture of normal suburban life. Mom speaks in a quiet, controlled voice about normal family stress and teenage drama, explaining that I've been going through a difficult phase lately. I want to scream the truth, want to grab Imani and show her the pit and the shed and make her understand what really happens here. But Dad's hand is on my shoulder, heavy and threatening, and the words die in my throat before they can form. I just nod along with whatever Mom says, my voice small and careful. Imani notices things anyway, her trained eyes catching details we can't hide completely. She sees the way we all defer to Dad, how we look to him before answering any question. She notices how Mom's hands shake slightly when she talks, how she keeps smoothing her shirt over and over. She sees the dark circles under my eyes and Yasmin's pale, sickly appearance, the way Yasmin can barely sit up straight on the couch. Imani asks to speak with Yasmin privately and requests permission to schedule a medical evaluation, citing concerns about her visible weight loss and chronic cough. Dad agrees smoothly, playing the concerned father who just wants the best for his daughter. He talks about how worried he's been, how he's been meaning to take her to the doctor but work has been so busy. But I can feel his rage building beneath the performance, can sense the punishment that's coming once Imani leaves. His hand tightens on my shoulder just slightly, a warning that only I can feel. After Imani leaves, Dad moves through the house like a storm, confiscating every phone and device he can find. He searches through our rooms with cold efficiency, opening drawers and checking hiding spots with the thoroughness of someone who's done this before. He takes my diary from under my mattress, Uchef's laptop from his desk, even Mom's old tablet that barely works anymore. He piles everything on the kitchen table while we watch in silence, then announces that outside contact is now forbidden except for school, and anyone caught talking to teachers, neighbors, or social workers about family business will spend a week straight in the pit. His voice is calm, but his eyes are cold with fury, and we all know he means every word. I think about my hidden phone in the garage insulation, and pray he doesn't find it. Pray that my one remaining link to the outside world stays secret. Dad looks at each of us in turn, making sure we understand the new rules, making sure we know that the consequences for breaking them will be severe. That night, after everyone goes to their assigned sleeping spots, I wait until I hear Dad's bedroom door close before sneaking into the garage. My hands shake as I pull the notebook from where I hid it under my sleeping bag earlier. The notebook is small and worn, filled with months of data tracking every ranking, every vote, every pattern in Dad's system. I feel along the garage wall until I find a gap in the insulation between the wall studs. The pink fiberglass scratches my fingers as I push the notebook deep into the gap, stuffing it as far back as my arm can reach. It's not much, but it's evidence that this has been going on for years, showing how Dad manipulates everything while pretending the system is fair. I pull my hand out and arrange the insulation to look undisturbed, then step back to check if anything looks different. The wall looks normal, and I let myself breathe a little easier, knowing Dad can't find this one piece of proof. I go back to my yoga mat and lie down, listening to the house settle into its usual nighttime sounds. That's when I hear it through the thin walls. Mom's voice comes from Yasmin's room. Barely more than a whisper, but I can make out the words. She's talking about maybe taking Yasmin to the clinic tomorrow without telling Dad, and her voice shakes but sounds determined in a way I haven't heard in months. For just a second, I let myself hope that Mom might actually do something, might finally stand up and protect Yasmin instead of just accepting whatever Dad decides. Then Yasmin coughs in response. That wet, painful cough that's been getting worse for weeks, and she's too weak to even answer Mom's question. I hear Mom's brief spark of courage die in the silence, replaced by quiet crying that she tries to muffle with her pillow. I close my eyes and force myself not to cry too, because crying doesn't change anything, and I need to stay focused on what I can actually do. The next morning, I'm eating cereal at the kitchen table when Dad announces he'll drive Mom and Yasmin to the clinic himself. His voice is cheerful and concerned, playing the caring father role perfectly. Mom's face goes blank as she realizes he heard her whispering last night, that he's taking over her plan before she can act on it. Dad explains that he's been worried about Yasmin too, and wants to make sure she gets proper care, completely stealing Mom's idea and making it his own. At the clinic, Dad stays with them the entire time, sitting right next to Yasmin during the examination. He answers all the doctor's questions before Mom can speak, describing Yasmin's symptoms in careful detail that makes him sound attentive and responsible. The doctor prescribes basic cold medicine and tells them to come back if the cough doesn't improve in a week. Dad thanks the doctor warmly and herds Mom and Yasmin straight back to the car, not giving Mom a single moment alone to say anything different. When they get home, Mom's face is completely blank again, that empty, defeated look that means she's given up. She realizes escape isn't possible, that Dad controls even her small attempts at independence, that there's no way out of his system. At dinner that night, I take a huge risk and slip my phone into my hoodie pocket before coming to the table. Dad's earlier search missed it because I'd hidden it in the bathroom ceiling tiles, and now it's my only remaining link to the outside world. I position the phone carefully in my pocket with the microphone facing out, then press record as Dad starts reading through his clipboard. The audio captures everything in muffled but clear quality. Dad's voice announcing it's time for rankings, the scrape of chairs as we all shift nervously, his explanations of how the system works and why it's fair. Mom's quiet voice ranking herself last like always, Uchef's manipulation tactics as he reminds everyone about favors they owe him. The phone picks up all of it, proof that this is real, that we're not making it up or being dramatic. My hands sweat under the table, but I keep them still, terrified Dad will notice the slight bulge in my pocket or hear the faint electronic hum. After Dad finishes announcing the rankings, he stands up with barely contained excitement. His eyes actually light up as he declares the pit is now live for tonight's placement. He describes it like he's unveiling some amazing new feature, explaining that storms are coming this week and the tarp will keep rain out while the dirt walls provide natural insulation. He talks about drainage and temperature regulation, genuinely proud of his engineering. His enthusiasm for our suffering is so obvious it makes my stomach twist, and I have to look down at my plate to keep from showing my disgust. Dad asks if anyone has questions about the new system, and we all stay silent, knowing that speaking up just makes things worse. Then Yuchef suddenly sits up straighter and points at Mom. He accuses her of tampering with the voting by trying to signal to Yasmin during the ranking, which is completely made up but gives him a perfect excuse. Dad's eyes narrow as he looks at Mom, asking if this is true. Mom shakes her head, but her denial is weak and unconvincing because she's too defeated to fight back. Dad seizes on Yuchef's accusation immediately, praising him for maintaining system integrity and being vigilant about rule violations. He confirms that Mom will take the pit tonight as punishment for attempting to manipulate the voting process. I watch my brother sacrifice our mother without any hesitation, selling her out to protect his own ranking, and something inside me breaks permanently. The part of me that still believed family meant something, that still hoped we could somehow come together against Dad, just dies right there at the dinner table. Yusef won't meet my eyes as Dad writes Mom's name next to the pit assignment, and I realize my brother is completely lost to Dad's system now. After dinner, I go to the garage and lie down on my yoga mat, listening to the sound of rain starting to fall outside. Each drop hits the roof like a tiny hammer, and I know Mom is in that pit right now with only a tarp between her and the storm. The guilt and rage mix together until I can barely breathe, my chest tight with the weight of knowing I could have ranked her higher but didn't. But the anger also makes my resolve harder and clearer. Tomorrow I'm calling 911 no matter what happens to me afterward, no matter how Dad punishes me or what threats he makes. Someone has to break the silence even if it means Dad punishes me until I break too, because staying quiet isn't protecting anyone anymore. I lie there for hours listening to the rain get heavier, imagining Mom in that dirt hole getting colder and wetter, and I promise myself that this ends tomorrow. At the school the next morning, Mrs. McCann pulls me aside before class starts. She asks directly about the uncomfortable sleeping places I mentioned in my essay last week, her voice gentle but firm. I'm so exhausted and scared that the words just come out before I can stop them. I tell her about the shed, about how it's metal and cold and full of spiders, about how we take turns sleeping there based on rankings. Mrs. McCann goes very still as I talk, her face getting paler with each detail. She asks careful questions about how often this happens and who decides the sleeping arrangements, and I can see her mentally filing a mandated report even as we speak. Her hand shakes slightly as she writes notes, and when I finish talking, she tells me she's going to make sure I get help. By lunch, Mr. McCann has updated her CPS report with explicit concerns about inadequate shelter and potential hypothermia risk. She includes my direct statement about the metal shed, detailed notes about Yasmin's declining health that she's observed during school pickup, and her observations of our family's fear-based dynamics. The report gets flagged as high priority because it involves young children and dangerous living conditions, and CPS assigns it to Imani for immediate follow-up. That afternoon, Imani returns to our house with 2 police officers, their expressions serious and concerned. Dad's performance is absolutely flawless as he invites them inside with a warm smile. He shows them the shed, which he's filled with camping equipment and clean blankets, making it look like a fun outdoor adventure spot rather than a punishment cell. Dad explains calmly that I've been telling stories because I'm angry about normal discipline, that I have a vivid imagination and sometimes exaggerate to get attention. He suggests I might need counseling for my tendency to dramatize regular family situations. The officers look uncertain as they compare Dad's reasonable explanations to what they were told to investigate. One officer asks me directly if anyone forces me to sleep outside, and Dad's hand lands on my shoulder, heavy and threatening. I open my mouth, but nothing comes out because I can feel Dad's fingers pressing into my shoulder blade, a silent reminder of what happens if I speak up. The officers exchange glances and tell Dad they'll file a report, but everything seems fine for now. Just make sure proper supervision is maintained. They leave with just a warning about keeping better communication with the school, and my heart sinks into my stomach as I watch their car pull away. Dad closes the door and turns to look at me, and the pleasant expression drops from his face like a mask being removed. He doesn't yell or scream like I expected, which somehow makes everything worse. Dad just stands there looking at me with this calm, cold expression, and announces that I'll be sleeping in the pit tonight regardless of the rankings, as a consequence for lying to authorities. Mom's head snaps up and she opens her mouth to protest, but Dad turns that same cold look on her, and she shrinks back into her chair without making a sound. I watch this happen, and something clicks in my brain about what seeking help actually costs, how the punishment for speaking up is immediate, and everyone else just watches it happen because they're too scared to intervene. Dad doesn't need to hit anyone or break things when he can control us with just a look and the threat of that hole in the ground. The rest of dinner passes in complete silence while Dad finishes his meal like nothing happened, and I sit there knowing that in a few hours I'll be climbing down into actual dirt with only a tarp between me and the sky. When dinner ends, Dad dismisses everyone except me and explains very calmly that this is what happens when family business gets shared with outsiders, that I brought this on myself by exaggerating normal discipline to teachers who don't understand how families work. His voice never rises above normal conversation level, but every word lands like a physical blow. That night, I climb down into the pit, and the reality of it hits me harder than I thought possible. The dirt is cold and damp under my hands, seeping through my clothes immediately and making everything feel wet and heavy. The tarp above me drips rain through small tears, cold drops hitting my face and neck in random patterns that I can't predict or avoid. The walls are so close I can touch both sides if I stretch my arms out, and the feeling of being trapped makes my chest tight and my breathing shallow. I try to find a position that doesn't hurt, but every way I sit or lie down just presses more cold mud against my skin. Above me, I can hear normal house sounds, footsteps and doors closing, and I know Dad is up there getting ready for bed in his warm room with his soft mattress and locked door. Through the fence, I can hear Yasmin coughing in the shed, that wet, painful sound that means her lungs still haven't recovered from the pneumonia. She's only 10 feet away, but it might as well be miles, because we're both trapped in our separate punishments, suffering alone while Dad sleeps soundly, knowing his system is working exactly like he designed it to. I spend hours shivering in the mud while rain hammers the tarp above me, and I force myself to stay calm even though the walls feel like they're closing in. Spiders crawl across my arms, and I can't see them in the darkness, but I feel every leg touching my skin, and something with too many legs runs over my ankle, making me jerk away and hit my elbow on the dirt wall. The cold seeps into my bones until I can't stop shaking, but I make myself focus on tomorrow instead of right now, on what I'll do next, and how I'll make someone believe me this time. I think about Mrs. McCann's concerned face and the way the police looked uncertain, about how Dad's performance was so perfect they couldn't see past it to the truth. My body is freezing and scared, but something in my mind gets harder and clearer with each hour in this hole. I will not let Dad win. I will not let him bury me and Yasmin and Mom in his sick system. I will find a way to make someone see what's really happening here. Through the fence, Fergus hears the sounds again. Louder this time because the rain has stopped and everything is quiet except for the suffering in our backyard. He stands at his window in his dark house and listens to the wet, painful coughing coming from the shed and softer sounds of distress from somewhere else in the yard. He can't see anything because of the fence and the darkness, but he pulls out his phone and starts recording, capturing the audio evidence of whatever is happening over there. The recording picks up Yasmin's coughing clearly, each sound harsh and concerning, and underneath it there are other noises that might be crying or just someone trying to stay quiet while they're in pain. Fergus doesn't know exactly what to do with this recording yet, but something tells him to keep it, to save it as evidence of something wrong happening in that house. He records for 5 full minutes before the sounds quiet down, then saves the file with the date and timestamp showing it was recorded at 2 in the morning. The next morning at the school, I go to the bathroom before PE class and pull out a permanent marker from my backpack. My hands shake as I write, "We sleep in a pit," on my left forearm in big, clear letters, making sure it's dark enough to be visible and placed where people will see it when we change for gym. I don't write anything else. Don't add explanations or details, just those 5 words that tell the simple truth. In the locker room, other students notice immediately and start whispering to each other, pointing at my arm and asking what it means. I don't elaborate or try to make it sound worse than it is. Just repeat the same thing when people ask. Sometimes we sleep in a pit in the backyard. That's it. That's the truth. The PE teacher sees it when she's walking through, checking that everyone is dressed for class, and her face goes pale as she reads the words. She tells me to come with her right now and walks me straight to the counselor's office without explaining anything to the other students. I let her lead me there, and I feel both scared and relieved, because at least someone is taking it seriously this time. The school counselor sits me down in her small office and asks very careful questions about what I mean by pit and how often this happens. I stay calm and factual, describing the dimensions of the hole, about 4 feet deep and maybe 3 feet wide, with dirt walls and a tarp stretched over the top. I explain about the mud and the rain dripping through and how the walls are close enough to touch both sides at once. I avoid any dramatic language that might make them think I'm exaggerating or being emotional. Just stick to describing the physical reality of what exists in my backyard. The counselor's face gets paler with each detail, and she writes everything down carefully. Then Mr. McCann comes in and interviews me separately, asking her own questions about the pit and the shed and how the whole ranking system works. I describe it all the same way, factual and specific, giving them measurements and details they can verify. Both their faces show the exact moment they realize I'm telling the literal truth, not speaking in metaphors or acting out for attention. This is real. This is actually happening. Their expressions shift from concerned to horrified, and I know this time they believe me. Mrs. McCann excuses herself and goes straight to her office to call Imani, her voice urgent even though she's trying to stay professional. She explicitly names the pit in her update, explaining that I've now made consistent disclosures across multiple days and different contexts. She emphasizes that this isn't teenage drama or attention-seeking behavior, that I'm describing specific verifiable conditions that pose immediate danger to multiple children. She mentions the writing on my arm, the interview details, the way I stayed calm and factual instead of emotional or exaggerated. Imani's voice goes tight with controlled anger as she realizes the previous wellness check completely missed the real situation, that Dad's performance fooled them while actual abuse was happening in the backyard. Missy McCann can hear the shift in Imani's tone from professional concern to personal outrage, the sound of someone who knows they failed to protect children and is now determined to fix it. Imani hangs up and immediately begins coordinating with medical services to get authorization for a full evaluation of Yasmin. She's seriously concerned that the chronic cough and visible getting worse indicates real neglect that needs medical documentation. She calls Dr. Romano at the Children's Hospital and explains the situation, arranging for Yasmin to be brought in for a complete assessment as soon as possible. Imani knows that medical evidence will be harder for Dad to deflect or charm his way out of, that doctors documenting actual physical harm creates a case that courts take seriously. She starts building a file with all the reports and evidence, preparing for the possibility of emergency removal if the medical evaluation confirms what she suspects. Dr. Romano agrees to prioritize the evaluation and asks specific questions about symptoms and duration that Imani answers based on multiple observer reports. When Dad gets called by the school about the arm writing and the counselor interview, he comes home in a cold rage that makes the air feel dangerous. He walks through the door and announces that we're all being pulled from the school effective immediately, that he won't allow interference in family matters from people who don't understand proper discipline. He says anyone who tries to visit will be denied access, that he's within his rights to control who speaks to his children and when. The control is slipping from his grasp, and he's tightening his grip in response, making everything more dangerous for all of us. Mom sits frozen at the kitchen table while Dad paces and talks about his rights and privacy, and how teachers are overstepping their authority. Utef nods along with everything Dad says, already calculating how to use this situation to his advantage in tonight's rankings. I watch Dad's performance and realize I'm running out of time before he completely isolates us from anyone who might help. I know I have to act fast before Dad makes good on his threat to pull us from the school. So after the final bell, I tell Mr. McCann I need to stay late to work on a project, and instead I go to the public library 3 blocks away. I use one of their computers to create a fake email account with a name that doesn't connect to me. Then I set up a cloud storage account using that email. My hands shake as I upload all the photos from my phone, the pictures of Yasmin's frostbitten toes and the rust marks on her skin and the shed from outside. I upload the audio files I recorded of dinner rankings and Dad's voice explaining his system. Then I write an email to Miss McCann's school address explaining what each file shows, labeling them clearly so she'll understand the context. It's my last play, putting all the evidence somewhere Dad can't confiscate or destroy even if he takes my phone tonight. I feel both terrified and calm as I hit send, knowing I've just done something I can't take back, but also knowing it's the only option left. The email confirmation pops up and I log out of everything, clear the browser history, and walk out of the library into the afternoon sun, feeling like I just set something huge in motion that I can't control anymore. I walk home from the library with my phone feeling heavy in my pocket, even though I deleted everything from it after sending that email. The sun is setting and I know dinner rankings are coming soon, but for once I'm not worried about where I'll sleep tonight because bigger things are in motion now. When I get home, Dad is in his office and doesn't notice me slip in through the back door. I go straight to my room and wait for whatever happens next. That evening, after a silent dinner where nobody looks at each other, I'm lying on the yoga mat in the garage when Utef appears in the doorway. His face is red and his hands are shaking as he walks toward me. He knows I've been talking to teachers and he's scared because my snitching puts him at risk too. He starts listing everything I've done like he's reading charges in court, talking about the counselor meetings and the arm writing and how I'm destroying the family. His voice gets louder as he threatens to tell Dad every detail, promising I'll spend weeks in the pit once Dad finds out. But then he mentions the pit and something breaks in his voice. For just a second, his eyes show pure fear instead of the calculating look he usually has. He's terrified too, I realize. He's just been dealing with it by siding with Dad instead of fighting back like me. Before I can say anything, he turns and walks out, leaving me alone in the garage with the smell of gasoline and motor oil. Hours pass and I can't sleep because my mind keeps spinning through what might happen tomorrow. Around 2 a.m., I hear a crash from inside the house, followed by Yasmin's scared voice calling for help. I run inside and find Mom on the kitchen floor, her body crumpled like someone cut her strings. She's breathing, but her eyes are closed and she won't respond when I shake her shoulder. Yasmin stands in the doorway in her pajamas, coughing and crying at the same time. Dad appears from upstairs, still half asleep, and starts saying something about Mom being dramatic. I don't wait to hear the rest. I run out the back door in my bare feet, across the cold grass to Fergus's house. I bang on his door so hard my knuckles hurt, not caring that it's the middle of the night or that I'm in my pajamas. When he opens the door, I'm crying and begging him to call 911 because Mom needs help and I don't trust Dad to do it. Fergus takes one look at my face and doesn't ask questions, just grabs his phone and makes the call while I stand shivering on his porch. The ambulance arrives in less than 10 minutes with lights flashing red and blue across the neighborhood. 2 EMS workers rush inside with their equipment while Fergus stays with me on his porch, his hand on my shoulder. Through the window, I can see them working on Mom while Dad stands nearby talking and gesturing. One of the EMS workers keeps looking around the house, noticing things. Our scared faces, Yasmin's pale skin, and the way she can't stop coughing. The strange setup visible through the back window where the shed and the tarp-covered pit sit in the yard. She writes things down on her clipboard between checking Mom's blood pressure and heart rate. Dad tries his usual charming routine, explaining that Mom has been stressed lately, and probably just fainted from standing up too fast. But the EMS worker's expression doesn't change as she documents Dad's defensive responses and the obvious fear in all our faces. When she's helping Mom onto the stretcher, she makes direct eye contact with me, and I see recognition there. She knows something is very wrong in this house. Less than an hour after the EMS workers leave, a car pulls up and Imani gets out along with 2 police officers. She's carrying folders and official-looking papers, and her face is harder than I've ever seen it. One of the officers stays by the door while Imani walks straight to Dad and hands him documents. She explains in a calm, professional voice that she has an emergency removal order for Yasmin based on immediate danger. The order cites medical concerns from Dr. Romano's notes, the documented inadequate shelter that multiple sources have reported, and all the evidence that's been building from my reports, and Ms. McCann's observations and the EMS documentation from tonight. My case is under review too, she says, but Yasmin is being removed right now. Dad's face goes from confused to angry to scared in about 3 seconds. His control is finally cracking as he realizes his perfect system is being taken apart by people he can't manipulate or charm his way around. Dad starts talking fast about his rights as a parent and false accusations, and how this is government overreach. His voice gets louder as he threatens to call his lawyer and sue everyone involved. But the police officers just stand there with their arms crossed, completely unmoved by his performance. Imani's expression stays hard as granite while she explains exactly what the law allows her to do in cases of immediate danger to children. She's seen enough cases like this to recognize the signs, she says, and the evidence is too consistent across too many sources to dismiss. Dad can either comply right now, or the officers will arrest him for obstruction, and Yasmin will still be removed. His choice. Watching him forced into helplessness makes my stomach twist with both fear and satisfaction. For the first time in years, Dad has no power over what happens next. They take Yasmin first, wrapping her in a blanket from the ambulance because she's shivering even though it's not that cold. She looks back at me with scared eyes as they help her into Imani's car. Then Imani tells me to pack a bag because I'm going to a safe intake facility while they finish their assessment. Mom sits on the couch looking lost and confused while Imani gives her a card for a domestic violence advocate. The drive away from the house feels like I'm watching someone else's life happen. I keep staring out the window expecting Dad to somehow chase us down and drag us back, even though I know that's not possible with the police there. The city lights blur past and Yasmin coughs in the front seat while Imani drives carefully through the empty streets. At the hospital, Dr. Romano examines Yasmin under bright lights that make her skin look even paler. He takes photos of her frostbitten toes where the tissue is damaged and discolored. He documents the signs of chronic malnutrition in her weight and the way her ribs show through her thin pajama top. He listens to her lungs and notes the respiratory issues from all those nights of cold exposure in the shed and the pit. He finds bruises in different stages of healing on her arms and legs. Each finding goes into his report with medical terminology that makes everything sound official and real. This isn't normal discipline, he writes. This isn't tough parenting. This is systematic neglect and abuse documented through objective medical evidence. Every line he writes strengthens the case for keeping us away from Dad permanently. A judge reviews everything that same night because it's an emergency situation. She reads Dr. Romano's medical report and the EMS documentation, and all the evidence from my disclosures and Ms. McCann's observations. She issues a temporary protective order for Yasmin immediately. My case is still pending more investigation because I'm older, and the immediate medical danger isn't as clear. Yuchef stays with Dad for now because he's 16 and hasn't made any disclosures about wanting help. That feels wrong, but I'm too tired to argue about it. The order says Dad can't contact me or Yasmin except through supervised channels approved by the court. Just knowing there's a legal barrier between us and him helps me breathe easier, even though everything still feels uncertain and scary. The emergency shelter processes our intake with forms about medical history and education and family dynamics and trauma symptoms. A woman with kind eyes asks questions and writes down my answers without judging or seeming shocked. Yasmin and I have to go to different rooms because of space limitations, and that makes my chest tight with worry. But a staff member promises I can see her first thing tomorrow morning. Everything feels temporary and uncertain, like we're just waiting for the next bad thing to happen. But at least we're not in the pit tonight. At least we're not in the shed listening to rain hammer the metal roof. At least we're somewhere warm with real beds and people who are supposed to keep us safe. The next morning, Imani comes back and explains the safety plan in detail. Dad cannot reach us without going through official channels, she says. Any contact has to be supervised and approved by the court. If he tries to contact us directly, he'll be arrested for violating the protective order. She offers Mom the same protections if she wants them. Mom sits across from us looking small and scared, caught between her fear of Dad and her fear of losing her home and everything familiar. I can see her struggling with the decision, wanting to leave but not knowing how to function without Dad's structure telling her what to do every day. Even though that structure was destroying us, It's all she knows anymore. Imani gives her time to think about it and promises to check in again tomorrow. For now, Yasmin and I are safe. For now, that has to be enough. The next morning, a woman from the shelter knocks on my door and explains they have a therapist who works with kids in situations like mine. I agree to meet with her even though the idea of talking to a stranger about the rankings and the pit makes my stomach hurt. The therapist is younger than I expected, with kind eyes that don't push or demand anything from me. She sits across from me in a small office and explains that weekly sessions are available whenever I'm ready to talk, that there's no pressure or timeline, that this is my space to use however I need. It feels strange having someone care about how I'm doing without expecting anything back, without ranking me or punishing me for existing. She gives me a card with her contact information and tells me the shelter staff can schedule appointments anytime, then lets me leave after just 10 minutes because she can see I'm not ready yet. That afternoon, Miss I. McCann shows up at the shelter carrying a stack of my schoolwork and 3 books she thought I'd like, her eyes wet with tears when she sees me sitting in the common area. She doesn't ask for details about what happened or make me relive any of it, just pulls up a chair and tells me she's proud of me for speaking up. She explains that I can return to the school whenever I feel ready, that she'll help me catch up on assignments, that my teachers all know I'm dealing with family stuff and they're being understanding. Having one adult who believed me and fought for me makes the whole nightmare feel slightly less lonely, like maybe I wasn't crazy for thinking the rankings were wrong. She stays for an hour helping me organize the schoolwork and talking about normal things like upcoming assignments and a book she thinks I'll love, treating me like a regular student instead of a victim. 2 days later, my phone rings from a blocked number and I almost don't answer, but something makes me pick up. Dad's voice comes through smooth and calm, using his reasonable tone that always means he's trying to manipulate someone. He tells me this whole situation is just a big misunderstanding, that if I explain to the judge how the system really worked, they'll understand it was fair, that I'm being dramatic and ruining the family over normal discipline. My hands start shaking as he talks, his words trying to worm into my brain and make me doubt what I know is true. Instead of listening or arguing, I hang up and immediately walk to find Imani. My voice shakes as I report the violation, but I do it anyway, explaining about the blocked number and what he said, and how he's not supposed to contact me at all. Imani's face goes hard, and she makes notes on her tablet, thanking me for reporting it right away, and promising this will be documented. For the first time, I feel like I have some power instead of just being a victim of Dad's system, like my voice actually matters and people will listen. The emergency court hearing happens 3 days later with the judge reviewing everything in a small courtroom that smells like old wood and cleaning products. Dad's lawyer stands up and argues that this is government overreach, that normal parenting is being treated like a crime, that the protective order is too strict for what amounts to family discipline. The judge listens with a neutral expression, then asks to see Dr. Romano's medical report and the documentation of Dad's phone call violation. She reads through the pages slowly, her face getting more serious with each paragraph, then announces she's extending the protective order for another 90 days while the investigation continues. Dad's lawyer objects, but the evidence is too clear to dismiss. Too many reports and medical findings and documented violations piling up into something he can't explain away. The judge makes it clear that Yasmin and I are legally protected from Dad's control for now, that any further contact violations will result in immediate arrest. Mom finally agrees to meet with the domestic violence advocate at the shelter, sitting in a private office with her hands twisted together in her lap. The advocate is patient and gentle, walking Mom through separation paperwork and explaining her options for housing assistance and legal support. Mom's hands shake as she signs the forms, her signature wobbly and uncertain, changing everything about her life with each page. She's scared about money and where she'll live and how she'll survive without Dad telling her what to do every day, even though his control was destroying all of us. The advocate lists resources and support groups and programs that can help, but I can see Mom struggling to believe any of it is real. It's hard watching her realize how trapped she's been, how the rankings killed her ability to imagine any path forward without Dad's system. That same day, I get a text from Yusef that starts hostile and angry, calling me a snitch and blaming me for destroying the family. He lists all the ways I've ruined everything, how I should have just followed the rules, how now he's stuck alone with Dad and it's all my fault. But then the tone shifts, and his next message admits he's scared living in the house with just Dad, now that the system is falling apart. He asks if I think he could join us in foster care, if there's a way out for him too, his words uncertain and almost vulnerable. I stare at the messages not knowing how to respond, because part of me is still mad at him for all the sabotage and the way he dug the pit deeper just to save himself. But I also recognize he's a victim too, just one who chose survival through helping Dad instead of fighting back like I did. I text back that I don't know what's possible, but he should talk to Imani, giving him her contact information even though I'm not sure I've forgiven him yet. Imani calls me into her office the next morning to explain that she's been working with Fergus to arrange something called fictive kin placement, which means I could stay with him instead of going to a regular foster home while the case is investigated. She explains that fictive kin is for people who aren't related by blood but have an existing relationship with the family, and Fergus has agreed to be considered after everything he witnessed. Fergus told Imani he's been worried about us for months and wishes he'd acted sooner, that he has a spare bedroom and wants to help if the placement gets approved. The arrangement still needs background checks and home inspections and official approval, but having a familiar option instead of strangers feels like an unexpected gift. 2 weeks later, after all the checks clear, Fergus picks me up from the shelter with my few belongings in a plastic bag. He drives us to his house next door to where I used to live, but I don't look at Dad's place as we pull into the driveway. Inside, Fergus shows me a small bedroom he's set up with simple furniture and clean sheets, explaining his house rules in a quiet voice. Be respectful of the space, help with basic chores like dishes and trash, keep up with schoolwork and talk to him if I need anything. He's not trying to be a replacement parent or act like everything is fine, just offering steady support while things get sorted out. That night, I lie in an actual bed with soft blankets and a door that locks from the inside, and I cry for an hour from the pure relief of feeling safe. The mattress is comfortable and the room is warm, and nobody is going to announce rankings or send me to the shed or the pit, and my body doesn't know how to process that level of safety after years of the system. Dr. Romano schedules a meeting with me and Imani to outline Yasmin's care plan going forward. He explains she needs continued treatment for the breathing problems from the pneumonia, physical therapy to help with the frostbite damage to her toes, and regular checkups to make sure she's gaining weight properly. The healing will be slow and some effects might be permanent, which is scary to hear, but at least now she's getting real medical attention instead of being left to suffer in a metal shed. He gives us a schedule of appointments and prescriptions and therapy sessions, making Yasmin's recovery feel organized and possible instead of hopeless. When I return to the school 2 weeks later, everything feels both familiar and completely different. Miss McCann welcomes me back with a warm smile and gives me time to catch up on missed work without pressure. For her next essay assignment about personal growth, I write about the power of silence, not describing the pit or the rankings directly, but exploring how keeping quiet protects people who hurt others. I write about how speaking up, even when you're scared of what might happen, is the only way to break cycles of abuse and control. My voice feels stronger on the page than it ever did at Dad's dinner table, each word chosen carefully to express what I've learned. Writing the truth without fear of punishment feels like taking back something Dad stole from me, like proving that his system didn't completely destroy my ability to think and feel and resist. A week later, Imani calls to tell me they've scheduled a case plan meeting for next month, where they'll interview Dad separately and figure out what happens next with family reunification or keeping us apart permanently. The not knowing is hard because nothing is actually solved yet. Yusuf is still living with Dad. Mom hasn't decided if she's really leaving for good, and the legal stuff moves so slowly, it feels like nothing is changing. I want everything fixed right now, want guarantees that we're safe forever. But Imani reminds me that progress doesn't always happen in a straight line. She says safety comes in stages, not all at once, and that I've already done the hardest part by speaking up in the first place. Her words help a little, but I still feel stuck in this weird in-between place where I'm safe, but my family isn't completely free yet. Tonight I'm lying in a real bed at Fergus's house, warm and safe under an actual blanket, and the strangeness of it almost hurts. I keep waiting for Dad to announce rankings, for Yusuf to sabotage me, for the expected punishment that always came before. But it doesn't come. The house is quiet except for Fergus watching TV downstairs, and I realize this is what normal feels like. Boring, peaceful, without constant fear. My body doesn't know how to relax because for years it was always ready for the next bad thing, always calculating who to sacrifice, always preparing for cold metal or dirt walls. Now there's just soft pillows and warm blankets and nobody is going to hurt me tonight. I don't know what happens next with the investigation or the court case, or whether Mom will finally leave Dad for good, but I know I'll keep telling the truth no matter how long it takes. Because silence is what allowed the pit to exist in the first place, and I'm done being quiet. And that's everything for now. I like turning small, everyday moments into something we can actually take away from. If it gave you a new thought or a bit of clarity, that's what counts. Subscribe so you can catch the next story lesson.